If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Frank Norris, and I've been a ranger here in the Boundary Waters of Minnesota for longer than I care to remember. It's a place of quiet beauty, all misty lakes and tall pines as far as the eye can see. Most days I find peace here, but not today. Today something feels off. I'm out on my usual dawn patrol, paddling my old canoe across the still water. The air is cool on my face, and the rising sun should be warming things up. But it's getting colder instead. Weird. As I guide my canoe around a bend, I notice how quiet it is. No birds singing their morning songs. No bugs buzzing around. It's like the whole forest is holding its breath, waiting for something. I can't shake this feeling in my gut. Something's not right. Maybe it's my old war instincts kicking in, or maybe it's just my imagination. But out here in the wilderness, you learn to trust your gut. It's kept me alive more than once. I grip my paddle a little tighter and keep moving. Whatever's going on, I've got a job to do. These woods are my responsibility, and I aim to keep them safe, even if it means facing whatever's out there waiting in the mist. As I paddle deeper into the misty waters, my eyes scan the shoreline. Something catches my attention. A flash of movement in the trees. I squint, trying to get a better look. Could be a deer, or maybe a bear, but it doesn't move quite right. I steer my canoe towards the shore, my old war injury making my leg ache as I step onto the rocky beach. The forest is dead quiet. Not even the crunch of leaves under my boots seems to make a sound. It's like the whole world is muffled. That's when I see them, mice tracks in the soft mud near the water's edge. But these aren't like any animal prints I've ever seen before. They're huge, bigger than a bear's, with long claw marks dragging through the dirt. And then just like that, they vanish. It's as if whatever made them just disappeared into thin air. A chill runs down my spine, and it's not from the cold. I've been in these woods for years, but I've never seen anything like this. I reach for my grandfather's old compass, a habit when I'm feeling unsure. But as I hold it out, the needle starts to spin wildly, like it's gone haywire. I tap it, shake it, but it won't stop. Something's very wrong here. I can feel it in my bones. Whatever's out there, it's not natural. And I've got a sinking feeling that I'm about to find out just how dangerous it can be. I decide to follow the strange tracks, hoping they might lead me to some answers. As I walk deeper into the woods, the mist seems to get thicker, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Suddenly, I stumble upon a campsite. At first glance, it looks normal. A tent, a fire pit, some backpacks, but something's not right. The fire's still smoking, like it was put out in a hurry. There's food left on plates, half eaten. It's as if the campers just vanished in the middle of their meal. My heart starts beating faster. Where did these people go? Why would they leave everything behind? As I look around for clues, I notice something that makes my blood run cold. High up on a nearby tree, there are 3 long, deep claw marks. They're too high for any animal I know, and too big to be from a bear or mountain lion. I reach out to touch the marks, and the bark crumbles under my fingers. Whatever made these, it did it recently, maybe even last night. Just then, I hear something that makes me freeze. A strange whistling sound echoes through the trees. It's unlike any bird call I've ever heard. In fact, it almost sounds like words, like someone's trying to talk through the wind. I spin around trying to figure out where it's coming from. But the sound seems to be everywhere and nowhere. My hand tightens on my radio. I should call this in, get some backup out here. But something tells me that whatever's going on, it's beyond anything my fellow rangers have dealt with before. I'm on my own, and I've got a feeling things are about to get a whole lot worse. As I stand there trying to make sense of it all, my radio crackles to life. It's Thomas, the young ranger I've been training. His voice sounds shaky. "Frank, you there? We've got reports of missing hikers, 3 of them, last seen near your area." My stomach drops. Those missing hikers, could they be the ones from this abandoned campsite? "I'm on it, Thomas. I reply, trying to keep my voice steady. Meet me at Lookout Point in an hour. We'll start the search from there. I take one last look around the eerie campsite before heading out. The whistling sound has stopped, but the silence feels even worse now. As I make my way to Lookout Point, the forest seems to close in around me. Shadows flicker at the edge of my vision, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. It's like the whole woods are playing tricks on me. I reach the meeting spot early and wait for Thomas. The fog is getting thicker by the minute. I can barely see the lake now, even though I know it's right in front of me. Suddenly, I hear footsteps approaching. Thomas? I call out, but there's no answer. The footsteps get closer. My hand moves to my belt, where I keep my flashlight and knife. The hair on the back of my neck stands up. Then out of the mist, a figure appears. It's Thomas, but something's off. He's moving strangely, and his eyes look distant. Thomas? I say again, my voice barely above a whisper. You okay, kid? He looks at me, and in that moment, I know. Whatever we're dealing with, it's already gotten to him, and now it's coming for me. My heart races as I stare at Thomas. His eyes are glassy, like he's not really there. When he speaks, his voice sounds hollow, almost like it's coming from somewhere else. We need to go deeper into the woods, Frank, Thomas says. The hikers, I think I know where they are. Every instinct in my body screams that this is wrong, but I can't leave Thomas. Not like this. I nod slowly, keeping my distance. All right, lead the way, I say, my hand never leaving my knife. As we walk, the fog gets so thick I can barely see Thomas in front of me. The temperature drops even more, and I can see my breath in the air. It's like we're walking into another world. Suddenly, Thomas stops. Do you hear that? He asks. At first I hear nothing, then faintly, I catch it. That same eerie whistling from before, but this time, it sounds almost like words, like it's calling my name. Frank. Frank. This way, I shake my head, trying to clear it. The voice sounds so familiar, so tempting to follow. But then I remember, this is how it lures people in. Thomas, we need to turn back, I say firmly. This isn't right. But when I look up, Thomas is gone. The fog swirls where he was standing just a moment ago. I'm alone in this ghostly forest, with that whispered voice calling me deeper into danger. I grip my knife tighter, my palms sweaty despite the cold. Whatever this thing is, it's clever. It's using our own voices against us. And now, I have to find a way to outsmart it, before it's too late for all of us. I take a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I've got to think this through. The voice is still calling, sounding more and more like Thomas with each whisper. But I know it's a trick. I pull out my compass again, hoping it might help. But the needle's still spinning like crazy. It's no use. Then I remember something my grandfather once told me about these woods. He said there were old stories, passed down by the Ojibwe people, about sacred places deep in the forest. Places where evil things couldn't go. It's not much, but it's all I've got. I close my eyes and try to picture the map of this area in my head. If I'm right, there's an old clearing about a mile north of here. It might be one of those sacred spots. I start walking, ignoring the voices that seem to come from all around me now. The fog is so thick, I can barely see my own feet. But I keep going, one step at a time. Suddenly, I trip over something. I look down and my blood runs cold. It's a boot with a foot still in it, but the foot looks wrong, dry and shriveled, like all the life has been sucked out of it. I shine my flashlight around, and that's when I see them. Bodies hanging from the trees, but they're not like normal bodies. They're all dried up, like they've been here for years. But I know these must be the missing hikers. My hands shake as I reach for my radio, but before I can call for help, I hear a twig snap behind me. I spin around, my heart pounding, and there, stepping out of the fog, is Thomas. But the thing wearing Thomas's face isn't Thomas anymore. Its eyes are glowing in the dark, and its mouth is stretched in a smile that's far too wide to be human. "Hello, Frank," it says in Thomas's voice. "Ready to join us?" My mind races as I stare at the thing that used to be Thomas. I know I can't outrun it, not with my bad leg, and fighting it head-on seems impossible. But maybe, just maybe, I can outsmart it. What are you? I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to buy time to think. The creature tilts its head, that unnatural smile still on its face. I am the wind in the pines, the whisper in the dark. I am hunger that never ends. As it talks, I slowly back away, trying to remember which direction that clearing is. North. I need to go north. You've lived a long time, haven't you? I say, still backing up. You must have seen a lot of changes in these woods. The thing nods, seeming almost pleased. Centuries pass like days for me, but some things never change. The taste of fear, the thrill of the hunt. I feel a tree behind me and quickly glance up. There's moss on the north side. Good. I'm going the right way. And what about sacred places? I ask, my heart pounding. Are those the same too? For a split second, the creature's smile falters. That's when I know I'm onto something. Enough talk. It snarls, no longer sounding like Thomas. Time to join your friends. It lunges at me, but I'm already running. I crash through the underbrush, branches whipping my face. I can hear it right behind me. It's breathing like a cold wind on my neck. The clearing has to be close. It has to be. My leg is screaming in pain, but I push on. If I can just make it there. Suddenly the trees thin out. I see a patch of open sky ahead. The clearing. With one last burst of speed, I throw myself forward. I hit the ground hard, rolling into the open space. Behind me, I hear an inhuman shriek of rage. I look back to see the creature, no longer looking like Thomas, pacing at the edge of the clearing. It can't come in. I've made it to safety, but as I catch my breath, I realize the horrible truth. I'm trapped here, and out there, that thing is still waiting, hungry for its next victim. I sit in the clearing, catching my breath. The creature paces just beyond the trees, its eyes glowing with anger. I know I'm safe for now, but I can't stay here forever. As the sun starts to set, I try to think of a plan. My radio's broken from the fall, so I can't call for help. And I know if I leave this clearing, that thing will be on me in seconds. Night falls, and the forest gets even quieter. The only sound is the wind in the trees, which now seems to carry whispers. I try to ignore them, but it's hard. Frank, come out, Frank. We're waiting for you. I shake my head, trying to clear it. I can't let it get to me. I need to focus. Then I remember something. In my pocket, I still have my grandfather's old compass. I pull it out, and for the first time since this all started, the needle isn't spinning. It's pointing steadily north. An idea starts to form. Maybe, just maybe, there's a way out of this. I stand up, my legs shaky but determined. I look straight at the creature and speak loudly. Hey, I know what you are now, and I know how to stop you. The thing hisses, its form shifting like smoke. You know nothing, human. I know about the sacred places, I say, and I bet there are more of them. A whole network, trapping you in these woods. The creature's eyes narrow. I can tell it's listening. How about a deal? I continue, my heart pounding. I'll lead you out of here past the sacred spots, but in return you leave this place, for good. For a long moment, there's silence. Then the creature speaks, its voice like ice. And why should I trust you? I take a deep breath. This is it, my one chance, because I'll be your guide and your insurance. We go together or not at all. The creature seems to consider this. Then slowly it nods. As I step out of the clearing, I grip my compass tight. I'm betting everything on this plan. If I'm wrong, I'm done for. But if I'm right, I might just save these woods and everyone in them. I take my first step towards the creature, hoping I haven't just made the biggest mistake of my life. As I walk towards the creature, my legs feel like jelly. It watches me with those glowing eyes, and I can feel the cold coming off it in waves. Lead the way, human. It hisses. I nod, trying to look braver than I feel. I hold out my compass and start walking. The creature follows close behind, its footsteps making no sound on the forest floor. We walk for what feels like hours. The woods are pitch black now, but somehow I can still see the path ahead. It's like the trees themselves are glowing faintly, showing me the way. Every now and then I feel the creature's icy breath on my neck. It's a reminder that one wrong move could be my last. How much further it growls, Not far now. I lie. Truth is, I have no idea where we're going. I'm following the compass, hoping it'll lead us to another sacred spot. Suddenly the compass needle starts to spin. My heart jumps me as this could be it. Wait, I say, holding up my hand. There's something ahead. The creature snarls. You're trying to trick me. No, I say quickly. It's the way out, but we need to be careful. One wrong step and we could both be trapped. I can feel its eyes boring into me, trying to figure out if I'm lying. I hold my breath, praying it'll believe me. Finally it nods. Show me. I take a deep breath and step forward. The compass needle is spinning faster now. I'm betting everything on what happens next. As we move forward, I can feel something change in the air. It's like walking through an invisible wall. I turn to look at the creature, and I see fear in its eyes for the first time. That's when I know my plan worked. We're in another sacred place, and this time, we're both trapped. The creature lets out a bone-chilling scream as it realizes what's happened, but it's too late. We're both here now, locked in this small safe spot in the dangerous woods. I sink to the ground, exhausted but relieved. The woods are safe now, and even though I'm trapped here with this terrifying thing, I know I've done the right thing. As the first light of dawn breaks through the trees, I close my eyes. Whatever happens next, I'm ready for it. I've saved the Boundary Waters, and that's all that matters. As the sun rises, I open my eyes. The creature is still there, pacing the edges of our invisible prison. It glares at me with hatred, but it can't come any closer. Days pass. I'm not hungry or thirsty, which is strange. It's like time has stopped in this little bubble of safety. The creature and I watch each other. Sometimes it tries to trick me, using the voices of people I know, but I don't fall for it. One morning, I hear something different. It's faint, but it sounds like people calling my name. Real people. Frank. Frank. Where are you? I stand up, straining to hear. The creature hisses, angry and afraid. The voices get closer. I see flashlights through the trees. It's a search party. I'm here. I shout as loud as I can. Over here. The lights come closer. I see familiar faces, other rangers, local police. They look shocked when they see me. Frank, are you okay? We've been searching for days. I nod, tears in my eyes. I'm okay, but don't come too close. It's not safe. They look confused, but they stay back. Smart. Listen, I say, this place is special, sacred. Nothing evil can leave it. You need to mark it, protect it. Promise me you will. They nod, still looking puzzled, but they can see I'm serious. As they start to set up markers around the area, I feel a weight lift off my shoulders. The woods will be safe now. The creature is trapped, and people will know to stay away. I look at the angry spirit beside me. We're both prisoners now, but it's worth it. As the sun sets, I settle in for another long night, but this time I'm not afraid. I did my job. I protected these woods and the people in them. Whatever happens next, I'm at peace. The whispers in the pines won't hurt anyone else, and that's enough for me. My name is Michael Tanner, and I've been a ranger in these Appalachian Mountains for nearly 20 years now. I'm 42, born and raised right here in West Virginia. These woods, they're in my blood. My family's been here for generations, and we know every trail, every hollow, and every old story these mountains have to tell. I wasn't always a ranger, though. I spent some time in the military as a tracker. But when my brother Tom went missing in these woods 10 years ago, I came back home. I guess part of me hoped I'd find him, but another part just needed to be close to where he was last seen. Let me tell you, these mountains can be beautiful, but they can also be downright spooky. The trees grow so thick in some parts that barely any sunlight gets through. It's like twilight all day long, and the fog, it clings to the valleys like a white blanket, making everything look ghostly. I remember my grandpa telling me stories about these woods when I was a kid. He'd always say, "Michael, there's more to these mountains than meets the eye." He gave me this wooden pendant I always wear, said it would keep me safe from things we couldn't explain. I used to think those were just old tales to keep us kids from wandering too far. But lately, I'm not so sure. Strange things have been happening, things that make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever's out there might have something to do with Tom's disappearance. It all started about a month ago when I was out on my usual patrol. I came across something that stopped me in my tracks. There, in a clearing I'd walked through 100 times before, was a circle of stones. Now, I'm not talking about a few rocks scattered around. These were big, heavy stones arranged in a perfect circle, like some kind of ancient monument. The weird thing was, I knew for a fact those stones weren't there the day before. It would have taken a team of people with heavy machinery to move them, but there were no tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. That was just the beginning. A few days later, I found a deer lying in the middle of the trail. At first, I thought it had been attacked by a mountain lion or something, but as I got closer, I realized its body was arranged in a strange pattern, almost like it had been placed that way on purpose. It gave me the creeps. Then came the music. It was about a week after finding the deer. I was heading back to my truck just as the sun was setting. That's when I heard it a soft, eerie flute sound drifting through the trees. It was so faint I thought I was imagining things at first, but every time I stopped to listen, it was there, and it seemed to be coming from all around me, like the forest itself was playing a tune. My dog Max started acting weird too. He's usually as brave as they come, but lately, he's been growling at empty spaces in the woods. Sometimes he'll just stop and stare at nothing, his hackles raised like he's seeing something I can't. The final straw was when people in town started talking. Old Mrs. Johnson swore she saw tall, skinny figures watching her from the edge of the woods behind her house. When she tried to get a better look, they vanished into the trees. Other folks had similar stories. Always these strange, silent watchers that disappeared in the blink of an eye. I tried to tell myself there had to be a logical explanation for all of this, but deep down I knew something wasn't right in these mountains, and I had a feeling I was about to find out what it was, whether I wanted to or not. I couldn't shake the feeling that all these strange happenings were connected somehow, maybe even to Tom's disappearance, so I decided to do some digging. I started by going through old reports, looking for anything similar that might have happened in the past. That's when I stumbled upon something I never knew existed. Tom's journal. It had been filed away with the search reports from when he went missing. With shaky hands, I opened it up. Most of it was normal stuff. Notes about wildlife he'd seen, sketches of plants, but the last few entries, they gave me chills. Tom wrote about finding a hidden valley deep in the mountains. He described odd structures made of stone and wood, unlike anything he'd seen before. In his final entry, he mentioned hearing strange whistling sounds and feeling like he was being watched. I was still trying to make sense of it all when I got the call. 4 hikers had gone missing in the area where Tom disappeared. My stomach dropped. I knew I had to lead the search party. The next morning, I gathered a team of 5 other rangers and volunteers. As we headed into the woods, I couldn't help but feel like we were being watched. The forest seemed quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. We hiked for hours, following the trail the missing hikers had planned to take, but as the day wore on, things started to feel off. The trees seemed to grow denser, the shadows deeper. I found myself checking my compass more and more, but it kept spinning wildly, like it couldn't find north. Just as I was about to suggest we turn back and try a different approach, we stumbled into a clearing, and there, right in front of us, was a valley I'd never seen before. It was hidden so well you could walk right past it if you didn't know what to look for. As we stood there, trying to get our bearings, I heard it. That same eerie flute music I'd heard before, drifting up from the valley below. My dog Max started growling, his eyes fixed on something in the trees. That's when I saw them. Tall, thin figures, almost blending in with the trees. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then one of them moved, and I realized with a jolt of fear that we weren't alone. I turned to warn the others, but the words died in my throat. 2 of our team were already walking towards the figures, their eyes glazed over like they were in a trance. The others looked confused, disoriented. I realized with horror that whatever these things were, they were somehow controlling my team's minds, and they were coming for us next. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I grabbed the two team members closest to me and shook them hard, trying to snap them out of it. "We need to go," I yelled, but they just stared at me with blank eyes. That's when I remembered the wooden pendant my grandpa gave me. I clutched it tight, and suddenly, my head felt clearer. It was like a fog had lifted. I realized the pendant was somehow protecting me from whatever mind control these creatures were using. I had to act fast. I whistled for Max and started pulling my dazed teammates back the way we came. But the creatures were closing in. They moved so smoothly, almost gliding between the trees. Up close, I could see their skin look like pale bark, and their arms and legs were unnaturally long. We stumbled through the forest, the creatures always just a few steps behind. I could hear that eerie whistling all around us now, making it hard to think. Two more of my team wandered off before I could stop them, drawn towards the sound like moths to a flame. Just when I thought we were done for, I spotted a cave entrance hidden behind some bushes. Without thinking, I pushed the last member of my team inside and followed, dragging Max with me. The cave was dark and damp, but it seemed to muffle the whistling. As my eyes adjusted, I realized we weren't in a cave at all. It was some kind of underground chamber, with smooth walls that looked almost man-made. And there, huddled in the corner, were the four missing hikers. They were alive, but in the same trance-like state as my team. I tried to wake them, but it was no use. I was figuring out what to do next when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Michael?" I spun around and my heart nearly stopped. There, standing in the shadows, was my brother Tom, but he wasn't the same. His skin had a grayish, bark-like texture, and his eyes, they weren't human anymore. "Tom," I whispered, not believing what I was seeing. "What happened to you?" He took a step forward, and I could see he was struggling, like part of him was fighting against whatever he'd become. "You shouldn't have come here, Michael," he said, his voice raspy and strange. "They won't let you leave now. They need us to protect the forest." I realized with horror that Tom had become one of them. These hollow folk, as I'd started thinking of them. And now they wanted me too. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My own brother, changed into one of these creatures. I wanted to help him, to bring him back, but I knew I had to focus on getting the others out first. "Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I can't stay. These people need help. You've got to let us go." Tom's face twisted, like he was fighting some inner battle. "I can't stop them, Michael. They're too strong." Just then, I heard that eerie whistling again, getting closer. The hollow folk were coming. I had to think fast. I looked around the chamber and spotted a small tunnel leading off to one side. It was our only chance. "Tom," I pleaded, "if any part of you is still my brother, help us, please." For a moment, Tom just stood there. Then slowly he pointed to the tunnel. "That way leads out. Hurry." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed the two hikers who looked the least out of it and started guiding them towards the tunnel. Max helped by nudging the others along. We could hear the hollow folk entering the chamber as we squeezed into the tunnel. It was tight and dark, and I was sure we'd get lost. But somehow, maybe thanks to Tom, we found our way out. We emerged into the forest just as the sun was setting. I knew we weren't safe yet. I could still hear that whistling, fainter now, but still there. We stumbled through the darkening woods, the hikers slowly coming out of their trance. I kept one hand on my pendant and the other on Max's collar, using every tracking skill I had to find our way back. It felt like we walked for hours. Every shadow looked like a hollow folk, every rustle in the trees made us jump. But finally, we saw the lights of the ranger station through the trees. As soon as we were safe, I called for medical help for the hikers. They were okay, just confused and scared. To be honest, so was I. I knew I should feel relieved, but I couldn't stop thinking about Tom, trapped in that underground chamber, no longer fully human. And I couldn't shake the feeling that our escape had been too easy. Like the hollow folk had let us go for some reason. In the days that followed, things changed. I found myself more sensitive to the forest somehow. I could sense things I never noticed before, like I was more connected to the plants and trees around me. I spent the next few years researching, trying to understand what the hollow folk were and why they were here. I never saw Tom again, but sometimes when I'm deep in the woods, I swear I can hear his whistle on the wind. I still wear my pendant, and I still protect these mountains. But now I know their biggest secret. And I can't help but wonder what will happen when the hollow folk decide it's time to truly reveal themselves to the world. It's been 5 years since that night in the woods, and things have never been the same. I still work as a ranger, but now I see the forest differently. It's like I can feel the trees breathing, sense when animals are nearby without seeing them. Sometimes I even dream about places in the woods I've never been to, only to find them exactly as I saw them in my sleep. I've kept quiet about what really happened that night. Who would believe me anyway? But I keep watch, always on alert for signs of the hollow folk. Last week, I found another stone circle, this one bigger than before, and the whispers in town have started again. People are seeing things, hearing that haunting flute music. It's happening all over again. But this time I'm ready. I've been preparing, studying old folklore and protection charms. I've even started teaching some of the younger rangers about the signs to watch for, without telling them everything. They think it's just old superstition, but I know better. Yesterday, a hiker brought in a photo of what he thought was a weird-looking tree, but I knew right away it was one of them, standing still, blending in. They're getting bolder, showing themselves more often. I can't help but wonder if they're planning something big. Maybe they're tired of hiding, or maybe they think it's time to reclaim the forest for themselves. Every night before I go to sleep, I look at that old photo of Tom and me, taken just days before he disappeared. I promise him I'll find a way to help him, to bring him back if I can. But deep down, I'm afraid that next time I go into those woods, I might not come back out as myself. The hollow folk are out there, watching, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that soon, very soon, everyone's going to know they're real. I just hope we're ready when that day comes. For now, all I can do is keep watch, protect these mountains, and hope that somehow, someday, I'll find a way to save my brother and stop whatever the hollow folk are planning. Because if I don't, I fear no one else will. My name is David Redhawk, and I'm a ranger here in the Red Canyons of southern Utah. I've been working this job for about 5 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these ancient lands could throw at me. But this summer changed everything. It all started during the worst drought we'd had in decades. The earth was cracked and thirsty, and the plants were barely hanging on. Even the animals seemed to have disappeared. As I drove my patrol truck through the winding canyon roads, dust swirled around me like it had a mind of its own. I'm 37 years old, and I've always felt a bit lost. See, I'm Navajo, but I grew up in foster care, so I never really knew my culture. The only thing I have from my past is this turquoise necklace that used to belong to my dad. I wear it all the time, even though I don't know what it means. Before I became a ranger, I studied archaeology in college. I love learning about the people who lived here long ago. That's why I was so upset when I started finding ancient rock art damaged. Someone was chipping away at specific symbols, and it made no sense. But that was just the beginning of the weird stuff. I started noticing dust devils, you know, those little whirlwinds, following me around. Even on calm days, they'd pop up out of nowhere. And sometimes when I tried to use my radio, all I'd hear was this creepy chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The worst part was finding dead animals that looked wrong. They were all dried up, like every drop of water had been sucked out of them. I'd never seen anything like it, and it gave me the creeps. I didn't know it then, but all of this was leading up to something big, something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the world and myself. And it all started the day a family of tourists got stranded in the canyon during one of the strangest storms I'd ever seen. It was a scorching hot afternoon when I got the call about the stranded family. Their car had broken down in a part of the canyon that usually didn't see much trouble. But as I drove out to help them, the sky started to look weird. Dark clouds appeared out of nowhere, but they weren't normal storm clouds. They swirled with red dust, making the whole canyon glow an eerie orange. The wind picked up, howling through the rocks like it was alive. I found the family huddled next to their car, mom, dad, and two scared-looking kids. They were covered in dust and looked really shaken up. "What happened?" I asked, raising my voice over the wind. The dad, looking pale, said, "We were just driving along when this storm came out of nowhere. The car just died, and then we saw something." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What did you see?" The mom hugged her kids closer. "Shapes in the dust, like animals, but not quite right. They moved in ways animals shouldn't." I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing. This sounded way too much like the weird stuff I'd been seeing lately. Just then, my radio crackled to life. Instead of the usual chatter, I heard that strange chanting again. It was louder this time, and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The family heard it too. The little girl started crying, and I knew I had to get them out of there fast. "Okay, let's get you folks into my truck," I said, trying to sound confident. "We'll figure this out somewhere safe." But as we turned to go, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the swirling dust, just for a second, I saw a figure. It was tall and thin, with a head like a coyote, but standing on two legs, and it was looking right at us. I blinked, and it was gone. But I knew we were in big trouble. Whatever was out there in the canyon, it wasn't natural, and somehow I had a feeling it was after us. As we piled into my truck, I noticed my dad's turquoise necklace was glowing faintly. I'd never seen it do that before. Something told me it was important, but I had no idea why. All I knew was that I had to keep this family safe and figure out what was going on in my canyon. But as the dust storm closed in around us, I wasn't sure if I was up for the challenge. I tried to drive us out of the canyon, but the storm was getting worse. The dust was so thick I could barely see the road. The wind was pushing against the truck, making it hard to steer. The family was quiet in the back, except for the little girl who kept whimpering. Suddenly, a huge gust of wind hit us. The truck skidded and spun. I managed to stop it before we crashed, but now we were stuck. The engine wouldn't start again. "Everyone okay?" I asked, looking back at the family. They nodded, but their eyes were wide with fear. That's when we heard it. Low, growling sound that didn't belong to any animal I knew. It seemed to come from all around us. "What's that?" the boy whispered. I didn't have an answer. I just knew we couldn't stay in the truck. "We need to find shelter," I said, trying to sound calm. "There's a small cave not far from here. We can wait out the storm there." We got out of the truck, and I told everyone to hold hands so we wouldn't get separated in the dust. As we walked, I kept seeing shapes moving in the storm. They were like shadows, but they moved in ways that made no sense. We were almost to the cave when I saw her, Minersa, an old Navajo woman, standing in our path. She appeared so suddenly, I thought I was seeing things. "Hurry," she said, her voice somehow clear over the wind. "They're coming." I didn't know who they were, but the way she said it made my skin crawl. We followed her into the cave, and as soon as we were inside, the wind died down. It was like we'd stepped into another world. The old woman looked at me, then at my necklace. "You wear the binding stone," she said, "but you don't know what it means, do you?" I shook my head, feeling lost. She sighed. "The skinwalkers are awake, and they're hunting." "Skinwalkers?" the dad asked, sounding scared and confused. The old woman nodded. "Shapeshifters from our legends. They can turn into animals, control the wind and sand, and they're very, very dangerous." I felt like I was in a dream. This couldn't be real. But then I remembered all the strange things I'd seen, and I knew she was telling the truth. "Why are they after us?" I asked. The old woman pointed at my necklace. "That stone can trap them. They want it destroyed, and they'll do anything to get it." I looked down at the turquoise, glowing brighter now. I realized we were in more danger than I could have imagined, and somehow I was the key to stopping it. The old woman taught us a simple chant that she said would keep the skinwalkers away for a little while. We all practiced it together, our voices echoing in the small cave. It made me feel a bit safer, but I knew we couldn't stay here forever. "We need to get to the ancient circle," the old woman said. "It's a place of power. There, we can use your necklace to trap the skinwalkers." I nodded, even though I was scaredy. How far is it? Not far, she said, but the path is dangerous. Just then we heard scratching sounds outside the cave. The family huddled closer together, and I stood up, feeling like I had to protect them. They're here, the old woman whispered. I peeked out of the cave. The storm had calmed a bit, but the air was still thick with dust. And in that dust, I saw the mice dark shapes moving around, sometimes looking like animals, sometimes like people, but always wrong somehow. We have to go now, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Everyone stay close and keep chanting. We left the cave, moving as quietly as we could. The skinwalkers were all around us, but they seemed confused by our chanting. They'd get close, then back away like they were scared. We walked for what felt like hours. The canyon looked different, like the skinwalkers had changed it. Paths that should have been there were gone, and new ones appeared out of nowhere. My necklace was glowing brighter than ever, almost hot against my skin. It seemed to be guiding us, pulling me in the right direction. Finally, we saw at Meist a circle of standing stones on a flat area of the canyon. They looked ancient, covered in carvings I'd never seen before. There it is, the old woman said. Hurry. But as we got closer, the skinwalkers appeared all around us. They were clearer now. Knee-test twisted versions of coyotes, eagles, and snakes. Their eyes glowed red in the dust. We ran for the circle, the family crying out in fear. I could feel the skinwalkers right behind us, their hot breath on my neck. Just as we reached the edge of the circle, I felt a sharp pain in my back. One of them had caught me. I fell forward into the circle, and everything went white. I knew what I had to do, even though it scared me. I grabbed my necklace, ready to use it to stop the skinwalkers. But I had no idea what would happen next, or if we'd make it out alive. The world around me was spinning. I could hear the family and the old woman chanting, their voices sounding far away. The skinwalkers were howling and screeching, trying to break into the circle. I stood up, my back burning where the skinwalker had scratched me. I held my necklace tight, feeling it pulse with energy. What do I do? I shouted to the old woman. She pointed to the center of the circle. Place the stone there and speak from your heart. I stumbled to the middle, my legs shaking. The skinwalkers were pushing against some invisible wall around us. I could see their twisted faces, angry and hungry. I put the necklace on the ground. As soon as it touched the earth, the ground started to glow. I didn't know what to say, so I just started talking. I don't know much about my heritage, I said, my voice cracking. But I know this land is special. It needs to be protected. So does everyone here. The necklace glowed brighter. The skinwalkers screamed louder. I give up this necklace, I continued, feeling tears in my eyes. Take it as a sacrifice. Trap these creatures and keep this place safe. Suddenly, the turquoise stone shattered. A blinding light shot up from the ground, forming a dome over us. The skinwalkers were caught in it, their bodies turning to sand. The wind howled one last time, and then everything went quiet. The dust settled, and the air cleared. The skinwalkers were gone. We all stood there, breathing hard, not sure what had just happened. The family hugged each other, crying with relief. The old woman smiled at me, looking proud, but something felt different. My eyes felt strange, like there was sand in them. When I rubbed them, the old woman gasped. Your eyes, she said. They've changed. I looked at my reflection in a small puddle nearby. My eyes now had swirling patterns in them, like tiny sandstorms. You're marked now. The old woman explained. You're connected to this land and its spirits. I nodded, feeling both scared and amazed. I had lost my only connection to my past, but I had gained something new, something important. As we walked back to safety, I knew my life would never be the same, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had found my purpose protecting this land and its secrets. And maybe, just maybe, I had found a piece of myself too. In the days that followed, things slowly went back to normal. Well, as normal as they could be after what we'd been through. The family was safe, and they thanked me over and over before they left. I think they were trying to convince themselves it had all been a bad dream, but I knew it wasn't a dream. Every time I looked in the mirror, my swirling eyes reminded me of what had happened. At first, it scared me, but as time passed, I started to understand my new connection to the land. I could sense things now. When a storm was coming, I'd feel it in my bones hours before the first cloud appeared. Sometimes, I'd know exactly where to find lost hikers, like the canyon was whispering their location to me. The old woman visited me sometimes. She taught me more about my Navajo heritage and how to use my new abilities. "You're a protector now," she'd say. "The canyon chose you." I kept doing my job as a ranger, but everything felt different. I walked the same paths, but now I saw the hidden world beneath the surface. The ancient spirits of the land were everywhere, watching and waiting. One evening, as the sun set and painted the canyon walls deep red, I stood at the edge of a cliff. The wind brushed against my face, carrying whispers of secrets long buried in the sand. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I knew there would be more challenges ahead. The skinwalkers might return one day, or some other danger might threaten this place. But I was ready. I had found my purpose, my connection to my past and to this land. As darkness fell over the canyon, I turned back towards my cabin. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new mysteries to solve, and I would face them all, guided by the ancient spirits and the swirling sands in my eyes. The canyon had chosen me, and I had chosen it back. This was my home now, in every sense of the word, and I would protect it, no matter what. My name is Eleanor Matheson, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm a ranger here in the Adirondack Mountains, and I've got a story that'll make your skin crawl. It all started on a gloomy day back in 1973 at a place called Shadow Lake. Now, Shadow Lake isn't your average body of water. It's deep, miles deeper than it should be for its size. The locals say it has no bottom, but I always thought that was just talk. The tall pine trees around it make these creepy shadows on the water, especially when the sky gets dark like it's about to storm. I was out on my usual patrol, walking along the shore. The air felt heavy, like something wasn't quite right. I'm the first woman to be a ranger in this area, and let me tell you, it hasn't been easy. Some of the guys still look at me like I don't belong here. But I've worked hard to prove myself, and I wasn't about to let a spooky lake get the better of me. Thing is, I've got a secret. I used to be a pretty good swimmer in Olympic level, even. But then I had a bad accident on a boat, and now deep water scares the heck out of me. I'm trying to get over it, but it's not easy. Especially not with a lake like this one staring me in the face every day. As I walked along the shore that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to focus on my job, but my mind kept wandering to my own problems. My recent divorce, my daughter who barely talks to me anymore. Little did I know, those worries were about to become the least of my troubles. That's when I saw at Mayo's the first sign that something was very, very wrong at Shadow Lake. I was walking along the shore when I spotted something strange in the water. At first, I thought it was just some trash. But as I got closer, my stomach turned. It was a fish, but not like any fish I'd ever seen before. Its eyes were gone, just empty sockets where they should have been. I looked around and saw more of them, scattered along the beach. My hands shook a little as I picked one up to examine it. The skin felt slimy and wrong. I've seen plenty of dead fish in my time, but this was different. It was like something had eaten their eyes away. I radioed back to the station, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey Jim, we've got a situation out here. You might want to send someone from the wildlife department." As I waited for a response, I noticed something else odd. The water level of the lake seemed higher than usual. We hadn't had rain in weeks, so it didn't make sense. I walked to the edge of the dock to get a better look, my heart beating a little faster with each step. That's when I heard it. A crackling sound from my radio, but it wasn't Jim's voice, it was something else. Garbled words, like someone talking backwards. I held the radio up to my ear, trying to make sense of it, but it only got louder the closer I got to the water. A cold breeze blew across the lake, making me shiver. I looked out at the water, and for a second, I could have sworn I saw a light pulsing deep below the surface. But when I blinked, it was gone. Just then, I heard barking. It was Max, one of our search dogs, out on a training exercise with his handler. They were heading towards the lake, but something wasn't right. Max, usually so brave and eager, was pulling back on his leash. As they got closer to the water, he started whimpering and trying to run away. I've never seen Max act like that before, and as I stood there, watching him struggle to get away from the lake, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, that dog knew something we didn't. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the strangest and scariest few days of my life. The next few days were a blur of weird happenings. More fish kept washing up, all with their eyes gone. The lake water kept rising, even though we hadn't seen a drop of rain. At night, I'd catch glimpses of those strange lights under the water, pulsing like a heartbeat. I tried to tell my boss about it, but he just laughed it off. "Ellie," he said, "you're letting your imagination run wild. It's probably just some chemical runoff or something." But I knew it was more than that. I could feel it in my bones. Then, on a cloudy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was at my desk when I got the call. 3 teenagers had gone for a swim in Shadow Lake and hadn't come back. My heart sank. I knew I had to help with the search, but the thought of going into that water made my palms sweat. As I drove to the lake, the sky grew darker. By the time I arrived, a thick fog had rolled in, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The other rangers were already there, getting boats ready and organizing search parties. "Ellie," my colleague Tom called out, "we need you to take the east shore. Radio if you find anything." I nodded, trying to hide how scared I was. As I walked along the muddy shore, calling out for the missing kids, the fog seemed to get thicker. I could barely see the water now, but I could hear it lapping at the rocks, louder than it should be. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint but clear, coming from the lake. "Help. Please, help us." It sounded like one of the missing teenagers. Without thinking, I started wading into the water, my fear forgotten, but as the cold water reached my waist, I froze. Something wasn't right. The voice, it changed. It wasn't just one voice anymore, but many, all calling out at once. And they weren't just coming from one spot, but from all around me. With a jolt, I realized what was happening. Whatever was in this lake, it wasn't just some chemical spill or weird fish disease. It was something much, much worse. And it was using our own fears against us. I stumbled backward, trying to get out of the water, but it was like the lake didn't want to let me go. That's when I felt something brush against my leg, something big and definitely not a fish. In that moment, I knew. The legends were true. There really was a monster in Shadow Lake, and it was hungry. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I tried to run, but the water felt like it was pulling me back. I could hear the voices getting louder, mixing with the sound of splashing water. Suddenly, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed and kicked as hard as I could. For a second, I broke free and stumbled onto the shore, gasping for air. "Tom." I yelled into my radio. "There's something in the water. We need to get everyone out now." But all I got back was static. The fog was so thick now I couldn't even see the trees around me. I was alone. That's when I heard a new sound, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The water in front of me started to churn and bubble. I knew I should run, but I couldn't move. I watched, frozen in fear, as something began to rise out of the lake. At first it looked like a giant snake, its scales glistening in the dim light, but then it changed, twisting and stretching until it looked more like a massive octopus, with tentacles as thick as tree trunks. Its eyes, I'll never forget those eyes. They were huge and glowing, and when they looked at me I felt like it could see right into my soul. I realized with horror that this thing, whatever it was, had been in Shadow Lake all along. It must have been sleeping for years, maybe even centuries. and now it was awake and hungry. The creature let out another growl, and I saw rows of sharp teeth in its mouth. That finally snapped me out of my trance. I turned and ran as fast as I could, slipping on the wet ground. Behind me, I could hear the sound of water splashing and trees cracking. The monster was coming after me. I ran until my lungs burned, dodging between trees and jumping over fallen logs. But I could feel it getting closer. I knew I couldn't outrun it forever. That's when I remembered something an old cave I'd found during one of my patrols. It was small, but maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to hide from this thing. With the last of my strength, I changed direction and headed for the cave. The monster's roar was so close now, I could feel it shaking the ground. I saw the cave entrance ahead, a dark hole in the side of a hill. Without thinking, I dove inside, just as a huge tentacle slammed into the ground where I'd been standing. I crawled deeper into the cave, my hands shaking so bad I could barely move. Outside, I could hear the creature thrashing around, trying to reach in. As I huddled in the darkness, catching my breath, I realized something terrible. This wasn't over. The monster was still out there, and those kids were still missing. And somehow, I was the only one who knew the truth about what was really lurking in the depths of Shadow Lake. I don't know how long I stayed in that cave, shaking and trying to catch my breath. It felt like hours. Eventually, the sounds outside stopped. The monster must have given up and gone back to the lake. When I finally worked up the courage to peek out, the fog was starting to clear. I could see the lake in the distance, looking calm like nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I made my way back to the ranger station, my clothes still wet and muddy. The other rangers looked at me like I was crazy when I told them what happened. "Ellie, are you sure you didn't hit your head?" Tom asked, looking worried. But I knew what I saw, and those kids were still missing. I spent the next day trying to convince everyone about the monster. I showed them the weird fish, told them about the voices in the water, but nobody believed me. They thought I was making it up, or that the stress had gotten to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those teenagers, trapped somewhere in the lake. I knew I had to do something, even if I was scared out of my mind. So I made a plan. I was going to go back to Shadow Lake, alone if I had to, and find those kids. The next morning, I packed my gear, flashlight, rope, first aid kit. I also brought my old swimming goggles. Just looking at them made my hands shake, remembering my accident, but I knew I might need them. As I drove to the lake, the sky was dark with storm clouds. It was like the whole world was telling me to turn back, but I couldn't. Not when lives were at stake. I parked my truck and walked to the shore. The lake looked bigger somehow, and darker. I took a deep breath and stepped into the cold water. That's when I heard it again. Mayas. Those voices, calling for help. But this time, I was ready. I knew it was the monster trying to trick me. I waded deeper, fighting against my fear with every step. The water was up to my chest when I felt something brush against my leg. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. I put on my goggles and took a deep breath. It was time to face my fears and whatever was waiting for me in the depths of Shadow Lake. I dove under the water, not knowing if I'd ever come back up again. The water was dark and cold. At first, I couldn't see anything. I swam deeper, my old swimming skills coming back to me. My lungs were starting to burn, but I kept going. Suddenly, I saw a faint light below me. It was pulsing, just like the lights I'd seen before. I swam towards it, my heart pounding. As I got closer, I realized the light was coming from a cave underwater. It was big enough for me to swim into. I hesitated for a second, but then I thought about those missing kids. I had to keep going. I swam into the cave, and what I saw made me gasp, almost choking on water. The cave was huge, and it was filled with things. At first, I thought they were rocks or old tree trunks. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized with horror what they really were. Bodies. Dozens of them, maybe more. Some looked old, like they'd been there for years. Others were newer, and there, near the back, I saw them, Mayas, the 3 missing teenagers, floating lifeless in the water. I wanted to scream, to swim away as fast as I could, but then I saw something move in the shadows. Something big. The monster was here in its lair, and it knew I was here too. I tried to turn around to swim back out, but suddenly the water around me started to swirl. It was like being caught in a whirlpool. I was pulled deeper into the cave, no matter how hard I swam. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time. The monster was huge, bigger than I'd thought. Its body was like a giant octopus, but its head was more like a snake's. And those eyes, they were glowing, staring right at me. One of its tentacles wrapped around my leg. I kicked and struggled, but it was too strong. It started pulling me towards its mouth. I thought this was it. I was going to die here, become another body in this underwater graveyard. But then I remembered something from my ranger training. Most water creatures have a weak spot, their gills or air bladder. With the last of my strength, I reached for the knife on my belt. The monster pulled me closer, thinking it had won. But as I got near its body, I saw what I was looking for, a soft spot just behind its head. I gripped my knife tight, and with all the force I could muster underwater, I stabbed it right in that spot. The monster let out a roar that shook the whole cave. Its grip on me loosened, and I saw my chance. I swam as hard as I could towards the cave entrance. Behind me, I could hear the monster thrashing in pain. The water was churning wildly, making it hard to see where I was going. My lungs were burning. I needed air badly. The cave entrance seemed so far away. Would I make it? Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, I burst out of the cave and started swimming up. The surface seemed miles away, but I kept going. Finally, my head broke the water. I gasped for air, never so happy to breathe in my life. But I wasn't safe yet. I could feel the water moving beneath me. The monster was coming. I swam as fast as I could towards the shore, my arms and legs aching. The water behind me was churning, and I could hear a low, angry growl getting closer. Just as I thought I might make it, something grabbed my leg. I was yanked underwater, twisting and kicking to break free. The monster's tentacle was wrapped tight around my ankle, pulling me back towards the deep. In a panic, I reached for my knife again, but it was gone, lost in the underwater cave. The surface was getting farther away, and my lungs were screaming for air. That's when I saw it, mice, a fallen tree branch, just within reach. I stretched out my arm, my fingers barely touching it. With one last desperate lunge, I grabbed it and swung it hard at the tentacle. The monster roared in pain and let go. I kicked to the surface, gasping for air. The shore was so close now. I swam with everything I had left. Hearing splashing behind me, my feet finally touched the bottom. I stumbled out of the water, collapsing on the rocky beach. Looking back, I saw the monster's glowing eyes just beneath the surface. It seemed angry but afraid to come out of the water. I got to my feet, shaky but alive. That's when I noticed something was wrong. My left arm felt weird, and when I looked down I realized why. Part of it was gone, torn off in my escape. I was too shocked and tired to even feel the pain yet. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called for help. As the monster retreated to the depths, I sat on the shore trying to make sense of what had just happened. The next few days were a blur. I told my story over and over, to the police, to my bosses, to anyone who would listen. Most people didn't believe me, but they couldn't ignore the evidence. The missing teenagers' bodies were found when they drained the lake, along with dozens of other remains, but they never found the monster. Just a deep tunnel at the bottom of the lake, leading somewhere even deeper underground. They closed off Shadow Lake after that, put up fences and warning signs, but sometimes, late at night, I can still hear those voices calling from the water, and I know that somewhere deep below the monster is waiting. I don't swim anymore, and I don't go near deep water if I can help it. But I also don't run from my fears like I used to. After all, I faced the biggest one and lived to tell about it. So that's my story, the story of Shadow Lake and the monster that lives in its depths. You might not believe me, but trust me, Misa, some lakes are better left alone. And if you ever hear voices calling you from dark water, run as fast as you can. My name is William Harrison, but everyone calls me Will. I'm a ranger here in Olympic National Park, and let me tell you, this place is something else. Picture the greenest forest you've ever seen, but then add a constant mist that makes everything look like it's straight out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare. I've been here for a few years now, ever since, well, let's just say things didn't end well at my last post in Yellowstone. But that's a story for another time. Here, it's just me and my boy Jake. He's 12 now. Smart as a whip and growing like a weed. It's not easy, raising a kid on your own in a place like this, but we make it work. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of dripping water. It's always damp here, like the forest is constantly crying. The trees are huge. I mean really huge. They're covered in moss and these weird hanging plants called lichens. It's beautiful, in a creepy sort of way. My job is to keep an eye on this part of the park. It's not exactly a tourist hotspot, which is fine by me. Most days, I can't see more than 50 feet in any direction because of the mist. It's like being in a bubble, cut off from the rest of the world. At first, I thought this place would be good for us. A fresh start, you know? But lately, things have been odd. I can't put my finger on it, but something's not right in these woods. And I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it all started. Back in the summer of '68, that's when the mist started acting strange, and our quiet life in the forest turned into something I never could have imagined. It all began on a day just like any other. I was out on my usual patrol, checking the trails and making sure everything was in order. The mist was thick as soup, like always, but something felt different. I remember checking my radio to call in, but all I got was static. Weird, I thought. It had been working fine that morning. I tapped it a few times, but nothing. Just that annoying buzz. As I walked deeper into the forest, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. You know that feeling when you think someone's watching you? It was like that, but 100 times stronger. I kept looking over my shoulder, but all I could see was mist. Then I saw it. Or, I thought I saw it. A shape in the fog, tall and thin. I blinked, and it was gone. Must be my eyes playing tricks, I told myself. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. When I got home that evening, Jake was quiet. He's usually a chatterbox, always telling me about his day. But that night, he just pushed his food around his plate. "You okay, buddy?" I asked. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. "Dad, do you ever hear voices in the forest?" My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of voices?" "I don't know," he said, shrugging. "They sound far away, like they're calling me." I tried to smile, to act like it was no big deal. But inside, I was scared, because I'd been hearing things too. Whispers in the mist, sounds that shouldn't be there. That night, I woke up to find Jake's bed empty. Panic hit me like a truck. I ran outside, calling his name, and there he was, at the edge of the trees, walking like he was in a trance. I grabbed him, shook him awake. "Jake, what are you doing out here?" He blinked at me, confused. "The tall men," he mumbled. "They were calling me." I hugged him tight, my heart pounding. As I looked over his shoulder into the misty forest, I could have sworn I saw something move, something that didn't belong in our world. That's when I knew, whatever was out there, it wasn't just after me. It wanted my son, and I was going to do whatever it took to keep him safe. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in danger. I started keeping a closer eye on Jake, and I spent more time patrolling the forest. But the weird stuff just kept happening. One morning, I found a deer in a clearing. At first, I thought it was sleeping, but when I got closer, I saw something that made my stomach turn. There was a cut on its side, clean and straight, like someone had used a knife. But it wasn't any hunter I'd ever seen. It was too precise. I reported it to my boss, but he just shrugged it off. "Probably coyotes," he said, but I knew better. Coyotes don't cut like surgeons. The mist got thicker, if you can believe it. Some days, it moved in ways mist shouldn't, like it had a mind of its own. I'd see it creeping against the wind, curling around trees like fingers. My radio kept acting up. Sometimes it would work fine, then suddenly go dead when I entered certain areas of the forest. It was like there were dead zones, places where technology just gave up. Jake's sleepwalking got worse. I'd find him at the window, staring into the mist. Once, I caught him trying to open the front door in the middle of the night. When I asked him about it in the morning, he never remembered. "The tall men are getting closer, Dad," he told me one day, his voice shaking. "I can feel them." I wanted to tell him it was just his imagination, but I couldn't, because I'd seen them too. Glimpses in the corner of my eye, tall, thin shapes that vanished when I turned to look. Always in the mist, always watching. I started having nightmares. Bad ones. Memories from Vietnam, mixed with shadowy figures in the fog. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. One evening, as the sun was setting, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. A group of those shapes, standing in a circle in a distant clearing. They were perfectly still, like statues. Then, as one, they turned and looked right at me. I blinked, and they were gone. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew that whatever these things were, they weren't human. That night, I locked all the doors and windows. I sat in Jake's room, watching him sleep, my old service pistol in my hand. Outside, the mist pressed against the glass, thicker than ever. I knew then that things were about to get worse. Much worse, and I had no idea how to protect us from something I couldn't even understand. The next few days were like walking on eggshells. I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Jake was getting more and more scared, and to be honest, so was I. One night, I woke up to a sound I'd never heard before. It was like a high-pitched hum, so faint I thought I might be imagining it. But then I saw Jake sitting up in his bed, his eyes wide open. "Do you hear that, Dad?" he whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. "Stay here," I told him. Grabbing my flashlight and gun, I crept to the front door and looked out the window. The mist was so thick I couldn't see the trees, but there was something else out there. Shapes moving in the fog, tall and silent. Suddenly, the humming got louder. Jake appeared behind me, his face pale. "Dad, they're calling me," he said, his voice sounding far away. "I have to go to them." Before I could stop him, he unlocked the door and ran out into the mist. My heart nearly stopped. "Jake," I yelled, running after him, but it was like the mist swallowed him up. I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. I ran through the forest, calling his name. The humming was all around me now, making my head spin. I saw flashes of movement, those tall figures always just out of reach. Then I found myself in a clearing I'd never seen before. The mist was swirling around the edges, but the center was clear. And there, in the middle, was Jake. He was standing still, staring at something I couldn't see. "Jake," I said softly, reaching for him, but he didn't move. That's when I saw them. The tall figures, standing in a circle around us. They were almost invisible, like ripples in the air. I could feel them watching us. One of them moved towards Jake, reaching out with a long, thin arm. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed Jake and pulled him back, pointing my gun at the creature. "Stay back," I shouted, but my voice sounded small in the eerie silence. The figure paused, then I heard a voice in my head. It wasn't words exactly, but I understood it. They had been watching us, studying us. They wanted Jake. They wanted to take him away. I held Jake tighter. "You can't have him," I said, my voice shaking. "He's my son." The humming got louder, and the mist started closing in. I knew we had to get out of there, fast. But how? My mind was racing. I had to get Jake out of there, but we were surrounded. Then I remembered something from my time in Vietnam. Fire. It clears the air. I reached into my pocket with my free hand, fumbling for my lighter. The creatures were getting closer, the mist thickening around us. "Jake," I whispered, "when I say run, you run as fast as you can back to the house. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I flicked the lighter, the small flame dancing in the darkness. Then I grabbed a handful of dry leaves from the ground and set them on fire. The smoke started to rise, cutting through the mist. The creatures made a sound like wind through trees, backing away from the smoke. It was working. Run, I yelled, dropping the burning leaves and grabbing more, spreading the fire in a circle around us. Jake took off, and I was right behind him. We crashed through the forest, the sound of that strange humming fading behind us. The mist seemed thinner now, like it was retreating from the fire. We burst out of the tree line, our house in sight. Jake ran inside, and I slammed the door shut behind us, locking it tight. We stood there, breathing hard, listening, but all we could hear was the normal sounds of the forest at night. "Dad," Jake said, his voice shaking, "what were those things?" I pulled him into a hug. "I don't know, buddy, but they're gone now. We're safe." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. I had a feeling this wasn't over. The next morning, I called my boss and told him I needed some time off. I didn't tell him why. Who would believe me? Over the next few weeks, things seemed to calm down. The mist went back to normal, and Jake stopped sleepwalking. But sometimes, I'd catch him staring into the forest with a strange look on his face. And me? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything that happened. I drew maps, marking the spots where I'd seen the creatures or where my radio didn't work. Most folks in town thought I was going crazy when I tried to tell them, but I knew what I saw, what we saw. Jake was different after that night. He could tell when it was going to rain before the weather report did. And sometimes, I'd swear he could see things in the mist that I couldn't. We stayed in that house, in that forest. Maybe we should have left, but where would we go? Those things, whatever they were, had been there for who knows how long. And something told me they weren't just in our forest. So we stayed and we watched. And we waited, because deep down, we both knew they were still out there, in the mist, waiting too.